Good morning and thank you very much for joining me. I am Yori Folari, and today I'm alongside Ifunanya Eze. Ifunanya is a maritime correspondent. Good morning, Ifunanya.
Good morning.
So today, maybe you're being here as I've even given a hint of what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about, the ports and export, import, and what COVID-19, what this worldwide pandemic is doing, how it is wreaking havoc with port operations, and it's key. We've looked at this subject before, again with the benefit of one of your reports that was showing us that all was not as it should be. At the time, there was supposed to be ships couldn't even dock, they couldn't even berth to offload. Where they could offload, the warehouses were said to be nearing capacity. So there were all those issues. Now the first thing is, has anything changed for the better since then?
Well, pre-lockdown and post-lockdown, that I'll be talking, in that light. Pre-lockdown, things were really very, very bad. Regarding the issue of warehousing of cargoes that were coming in, of course, vessels, the coronavirus before it came into the country when we had the index case was a global issue already. And of course, Nigeria, we were a little bit on the edge, knowing that shipping is a global business. Ship move from one port, from one country to the other. And the Port Authority and those handling our ports and government, of course, would be a little bit fidgety. The scare and the fear that these vessels should not come in with this foreign sickness, like it was, touted then. So the issue of vessels coming in, they were taking a little bit of precautions, ensuring that you don't just come in and bet, on our waters. So they allow them stay at a distance, queue up, and then
which then created a backlog.
Created the backlog, of course, and then. Other things became, snowballed into what we had, leading to the issue of that congestion. But again, during the lockdown, government came up with the directive that said, seaports must be functional because we can't afford to lock up our economy because of this pandemic, as it were. No country in the world actually locked up their ports in the first instance.
Yeah, but even all the port workers wanted it to be functional. It was in their interest to be for the ports to be functional. But then we also heard that there were challenges to that very desired functionality, because at the end of the day, it is human beings that are going to have to work it, and the lockdown and the difficulty in moving around, that was a major challenge. Does that situation remain as bad today?
No, it is not as bad as it was then. When the lockdown started and they put up all of those guidelines, so stipulations, directive, no going out, stay home, stay safe, and all of that. But again, stay home, stay safe, as much as that was a government directive. But again, there's another directive that says the port must be functional. And again, for the port to be functional, you must have the banks working. You must have stevedores to be, that work in the ship that come in. You must have agents going to the port to facilitate clearance of these cargoes. You must have customs officers, in the port.
How easy has it been for these different segments of the industry that you've mentioned?
Yes, the difficulty, that they saw during that period was the issue of transportation. Transport logistics was a huge issue. For the agents.
That is passenger transportation, because
yes,
when you talk about transportation in relation to our subject matter, there's cargo transportation.
Yeah, there's cargo transportation, passenger transportation, because you have to move from one location to the seaport. The seaport is in Apapa in Lagos. When you talk about the seaport location, it's in Apapa, Tinkan, and Tinkan area in Lagos. So for those who operate there, they come from different parts of the state. So for you to assess the port environment, you must move through the streets that are on lockdown. And when they are coming, they get harassed. One, if you don't even have your personal car, you can't even leave your house because you can't even get transportation out of your house. So that was what.
Even though they were essentials, they were not categorized as essential.
Essential,
services,
yes.
But here, the operation of it.
That is the point.
Was different.
Yes. So it became a major problem. So that was when the Nigerian Shippers Council, in collaboration with the Council for the Regulation of Freight Forwarding, came up and said, okay, fine, what do we do to ensure that as much as there are some customs officers who were able to, maybe customs as an organization was able to get their people to come, officers to come to the port to work, and maybe possibly shipping companies were able to get some of their staff to come to work. But the agents and freight forwarders, these are sole business owners, so to speak. They don't work under any organization that will say, oh, we are going to organize something for you. These are individuals, sometimes, of 2 or 3, in a company.
Tell you what, if I to help better comprehension of what you've been speaking about, you put out a report earlier in the week. I think we'll pause to take a look at that report, and then we'll come back to studio. And indeed, you've mentioned already Mr. Hassan Bello, the Executive Secretary of the Nigeria Shippers Council. All other things being equal, we should be speaking with him. Well, you shall be speaking with him as well and engaging with him. And let's see if Ifunaya's report, please.
The inability of some key operators in Nigeria's seaport logistics supply chain to provide maximum services is causing delays and generally affecting operations. Following the outbreak of the coronavirus pandemic, the federal government had mandated that seaports remain functional. But the ease of doing business at the seaports is being frustrated by hitches in the port's value chain. Key service providers in seaport operations are not providing the needed motion to drive a seamless operation.
No company is working up to 50% gear, just like shipping company. Most times, once it's 2 o'clock, then we shut down. Banks too. Banks close by say 1, 2. The 24 hours demurrage should not be applied anymore. If they must charge us, then should charge us half demurrage, because the shipping company are not working at their full strength. The terminal operators too are not equally working at their full strength. So the system is bad entirely. So something needs to be done at this point.
The port has not yet come up to the maximum operation that they ought to be, because they are still doing skeletal work. Up to now, the banks are still doing skeletal work too. So everything now is still the same thing. Because as it is now, the CBN ought to mandate the commercial bank around the port to carry out optimal operation within the port area.
The Apapa Customs Service says that the absence of scheduled officers at the financial institutions is affecting the generation of the pre-arrival assessment reports required to facilitate cargo clearance from the port.
As long as you don't have a full complementary of staffs in the commercial banks, definitely you have a multiplier effect. That is, the activities that are supposed to be done as at when due are not done, and this will translate to further delays in clearance and additional burden for payment of demurrages and the likes.
The current situation at the seaport has triggered a chain reaction that has resulted in delays in cargo clearance at the seaport, as well as adding to the cost of doing business. Ifunanya Eze, TVC News, Lagos.
Okay, then I masked Ifunanya there, and it's part of the new normal that we're talking about. And speaking of new normal, I noticed that everybody is painfully complaining about the strictures that have now come onto port operations. But the fact remains, the truth is, people are talking about a new normal. It's not going to go back to where it was before. And this, I think, is going to be a challenge. That's where a lot more thinking is probably going to have to be done, because I could get a sense from some of those professionals in there explaining that nothing is working at the optimum anymore, at the optimal level. But it's going to be like this for a fair bit yet, is the problem.
Yes, it's going to be like this for a fair bit, and that is where the issue of automation, becomes should be taken seriously by government. I know Hassan Bello was talking about this.
Which we're lacking in at the moment, or how?
We do not. Yes, it's not as if we are lacking. We have it, but not at the point we should, at the level of operations in our seaports and at the level of what Nigeria stands for with regards to trade, import and
So
export trade.
it's at best rudimentary.
Yes, and will I say a cake? So at it stands now, that is another area that government should actually pay attention to.
When you're talking about automation, just as a small aside, what does that mean in relation to the ports? Automation in the ports.
Automation, the port operation is, there's a link, is a value chain. It's every the operation of customs is not complete without that of the shipping company, terminal operator. So everything is linked. Even the haulers, I'm talking about the haulage companies, everything is linked. So if we don't have an automated system, when I say automated, let's say for example, with regards to, for a long time now, the issue of single window operation, has been something that everybody in the port system.
What's that? Single window
Single
operation?
window is a platform whereby all operators would see themselves. I don't necessarily need to move from a customs office to the office of SON.
Okay. There's this single window where you see the universe.
You see everything. So you can just take care. If SON want to check out those vessels that just came in, what cargoes are they coming in with? They just click on that platform, and they can get access to the customs platform and get the information they need. But again,
and that is not yet up and running.
We don't have it. It's been something that everybody's been.
Which complicates things further, because you've just said that the benefit of it would be you don't have to be moving all over the place.
Because it brings about too much human interface. Too much human interface, and too much human interface brings about delays. But once things are well automated, then in the comfort of your home, just like they do with customs, have been trying with that now. As an agent, a freight forwarder, you can be in the comfort of your office and you do your clearance procedures, and you don't necessarily need to. But again, there are some a point you get to, and you must come personally. Talking about cargo examination, if we add scanners in the ports, we shouldn't be having you see SON official, you see customs, you see being there physically to observe this. It is in that human interaction that the issue of money changing hands, the issue of, but if it's automated and there are scanners, what they do, the scanner, they check this, if there are any infractions, they seize the cargo if these are contraband, or if it's then they can carry out whatever diligence they need to on that particular cargo.
I was surprised when one gentleman on your report there also complained about the banks not working at the optimal level. Now that's a bit surprising, because I would have thought that the banks and their platforms, most banks, you and I know that you can actually action your account online. People can buy things from wherever online, all of it, your bank is involved. So I would have thought, are you also surprised that the professional and essential aspect of banking service in this regard, they can't achieve that online? Is there no such platform?
The thing we're still talking about, the maritime operation is a sort of a specialized form of business. It's not an all-comers affair. So when you go to a bank, it is not even all banks that are engaged in maritime operations as well. Reason of pre-arrival assessment reports, when they pay these duties, and ensuring that some of all these documents that are needed to ensure that clearance process before the ship comes. You take care of all these documents, prior to the arrival of the vessel, and then you pay your duties. So owing to
not all banks.
Not all banks, but most of the banks have keyed in now.
Are they designated?
But again, they are dedicated staffs. You have dedicated who
you have
are,
to
yes.
There has to be something like a desk in the banks.
A desk, yes. You understand that that you must understand this operation.
And not all banks have that.
Not all banks, and not every bank staff. You understand? So that is where the issues are. So in that regard, owing to this issue of lockdown, like I said before, it's like you create trying to bring up a solution, and that solution is also creating another problem. This is
quite interesting, but and we need to hear some more about this. And of course, as I said, we're waiting to get Mr. Hassan Bello, the Executive Secretary of our Nigeria Shippers Council, on the line. But we'll take a break. Stay with us, please. We'll be right back, and at some time we'll include your calls as well. Okay, welcome back. And we're looking at port operations. I have in studio here Ifunanya Eze, maritime correspondent at TVC News. And we also have on the, we will have on Skype Mr. Hassan Bello. Mr. Hassan Bello is Executive Secretary of the Nigerian Shippers Council. Good morning, Mr. Bello.
Good morning.
Thank you very much for joining us. And Ifunanya is here. I think you might be familiar with her. She's our Maritime's correspondent.
Good morning, Mr. Bello. Welcome.
How are you today?
Okay.
Yeah, good.
Now, actually, we're looking at the challenges, maritime challenges that we're facing in these special times. Things are not the way they've always been, and operators are complaining. There are those who say it's not going to go back to the way we've always known it. Tell me, sir, what do you think in terms of adjustments that we have to make for the so-called new normal as it relates to the ports?
Yes, you know, things are not normal, but from the abnormality, we have to draw inspirations and to make sure we don't go back to old ways of doing things. However, I know users of shipping services have groaned and complained, but the reality is nothing is normal. It's not only in the shipping industry, it is in communication also, it is in agriculture, in all aspects of the economy. Things are just not normal. And this has global dimension. You know, however, the most important thing is to study the situation and draw the strength of inspiration and said, okay, we are not going to be caught in this situation again. So what are we going to do to address the situation? That is very important for us to have. The ports are not working optimally.
Okay.
To the port of the
All right. Talking about the ports, not of course the ports are not working at its optimal level right now. But again, I know that Shippers Council during the lockdown period had the interventions with regards to ensuring that port operators, at least within the capacity that they can manage, do what they can do. But port operators, port users like the shipping agents and freight forwarders are complaining that shipping companies and terminal operators are however, frustrating their, all of these directives, especially with regards to this demurrage issue. I don't know what you have done so far with that.
Yes, for the demurrage, which was suspended during the period of lockdown, all the shipping companies are working to see that demurrage collected within that time is paid. But what is important to note is that the shipping companies are not operating as normal. They have to have about 50% of their staff at home because of lack of public transportation and some of the other things. So now is the period of payment, and everybody will be paid. I just want the agents and the shippers, especially, who are the owners of the funds, to exercise patience. All will be paid. We have instructed commitment of the shipping companies. It's just that they have to make some adjustments. These things are not as automatic or as easy as they may sound. But in the end, all will be paid. We have to look at the abnormality and work within it. This is abnormal time. It's not the usual time. People have to realize and appreciate that.
All right, as much as people would appreciate that, because like you've said, this sacrifice, would be borne by everybody, shippers, the shippers, freight forwarding agents, the shipping companies and terminal operators. But again, all of these are causing delays. Of course, one would consider the fact that the social distance policy observation, should be adhered to. But then, once the free days are over, shipping companies and terminal operators start counting the demurrage, and they still ensure that these people pay this, because I know that the free period lasted between March and and April. But now, things are not normal, should they still charge normal rates with regards to demurrages? That is what I want to know, sir.
Yes, this is what we have negotiated, and many people have been paid, you know. But those who paid will not, of course, say, "Oh, we have been paid." Those who have not, and this should be our concern. I think we are still negotiating with the shipping companies to see how we could, look at issues, dispassionately, and what sacrifice. But again, we are not only looking at the shipping companies; we are also looking at government agencies. Government agencies should also be part of the sacrifice. We also look at the truckers. The haulage companies, have given 30%, which has been observed, 30% reduction. So it is what I would call general average. Everybody should, offer some kind of sacrifice in order to collectively come and save the business of shipping. So we are looking at that also.
Mr. Bello, another crucial aspect is the banking aspect of the entire success, oiling the machinery of port operations. Now, can you tell us how well the banking sector has developed use of the internet to facilitate some of these things?
Yes, banking sector supports shipping operation. During the lockdown, it was particularly difficult for us, but we convinced some banks to open, especially around Apapa area, with limited services. Again, goes to show that everybody was operating with some limitations, including the banks. Now, we can't have the port operations without the banks. Payment of custom duty, for example, before the cargo exits the port must be done, and so many other things. Payment from the shipping companies to terminals, and so many other, payments must be supported by the banking system. But we are looking at the situation, and at the end of the day, we are going to come out with revolutionary issues, including having a virtual port system. That is non-contact port system, where there will be little or no human contact or interference. The problem with human contact is it brings delays, it brings corruption. But if there are online transactions, and some shipping companies and even terminals have got about 80% of their, applications online, we want the forwarders to.
I think the line has freezed on us again, but we know that Mr. Bello is still very much there. And indeed, he has answered in bulk the question. The only follow-up that I would have had is, as he was saying, the only follow-up I would have asked is that he actually ended up on that before it froze, that couldn't we have a situation where there's very little, do the banks need to be physically open? I mean, Amazon is not always physically open. Jumia is not always physically open. When I want to send anything across to anybody, or somebody send money to me, the banks don't need to be physically open. So it is that that would be the ultimate that we would, and while the line is being unfrozen, we're waiting for the line to unfreeze. We have Mr. Mukta. In fact, okay, we understand that Mr. Bello is back. So if you heard me, that I imagine would be the ultimate, where there's an entirely online platform availability.
Exactly, and that is what. That's hello.
We can hear you.
That is what will drive.
Well, the lines have gone that way again. But
Yes.
Okay, I'm afraid that what you said, we couldn't actually hear it, but you did say that indeed is also your objective, the objective of the Shippers Council and all concerned. Did I get that? Okay, now, but Mr. Mukhtar Mohammed is also listening to all of this on the phone. Mr. Mukhtar Mohammed is a financial analyst, apart from being a stockbroker. And so I say good morning to you, sir.
Good morning, Uncle Yori.
Thank you very much for joining us as well. Really appreciate your time. On this subject, what would appear to be the challenge? I made the example, perhaps it's simplistic, that look, Amazon, Jumia, universities sending money up and down in the country is no problem. You can do that at 11 o'clock in the night if you want, if you need to. What do you, with your understanding of the financial sector, what's the challenge in operating that for the benefit of the shippers, the whole maritime sector?
I think the challenge is still has to do with infrastructure. Infrastructure is key when it comes to all these technological wise, and most of all these people are in there to make money, and sometimes the charges the Shippers Council want, the bank want, they don't normally come at the bottom line or at an agreement on what they want. I think that,
in short, it's not cheap.
It's not cheap. And again, you know, the man in the Shippers Council, the shippers agents, they want to make money. They want to see how they can cut costs. So they have that bottleneck. They have that bottleneck when it comes to that. I think basically that's the challenge. But like your correspondent said over there, I think it's something that could have been addressed if they really want to really address it. Because what really is the issue has to do with technology. And technology itself is something that is evolving. Like you said, the Nigerian port is the gateway to the Nigerian economy, and it's supposed to be up and doing 24 hours. That was what they initially wanted. So if we go into technology, there will be a lot of seamless transaction, and people don't have to wait, and it will reduce corruption. That is the bottom line. It will reduce corruption, and it will bring more revenue to the government. But as it stands now, there's a lot of bottlenecks when it comes to clearing, when it comes to different fees are being charged in different sides. You have had issues where somebody finished paying his full clearance, like your correspondent was saying, is going out of the gate, and the custom guys on the gate there will stop him and say, look, your document is not complete. You have to pay this to us, otherwise we won't allow you go.
Okay.
So those things are things that should be addressed with technology. But like I said, technology is not cheap. And if you have to go into technology, that means the cost of transaction of business in the port will go up, and most of these shippers councils are not ready to do that.
Okay, Mukhtar, stay with us, please. We're going to go on a break now. We'll be right back. Okay, welcome back, and I'm in studio with Ifunanya Eze, TBC News Maritime correspondent. We also have Mr. Mukhtar Mohammed, financial analyst, on the phone, and the Executive Secretary of the Nigeria Shippers Council, Mr. Hassan Bello, on Skype. Mr. Bello, thank you for staying with us.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Bello, beyond looking at all of these issues now, the new normal, like we are terming it now, the issue of imports, we are as an import-dependent nation. Now, can we talk about export promotion? Let's look at what are we not doing right with regards to pushing and encouraging export and ensuring that all of these challenges we are facing in the in Nigerian port operation do not actually adversely affect export.
I think we are left with little or no option. You know, right now we are left with little or no option, but to drive export. The importation may dwindle next 2 years. We may not even, find import coming because of the disruption in the national logistic chain. So export is very important. And the problems exporters face are usually the inefficient logistic chain, lack of access to the port, lack of finance, and sometimes lack of market, and of course bureaucratic, laborious processes and procedures. the Nigerian Shippers Council is looking at editing all this bureaucracy so that we have more exports as far as the logistic chain is concerned. For example, only yesterday, we had meeting with some terminals, and we are allowing export to go on. Exports have been on the road for 30 days. They are not getting into the terminals, and they are losing schedules of, the vessels, and so many other problems. So we are looking categorically at the export. We have no choice but to come and have a robust export regime. For example, we should have a dedicated terminal for export, so that this thing will be processed, on fast track.
But Mr. Bello, Mr. Bello, I'm sorry to
Yes.
interrupt you. I thought we do have dedicated export terminals at the Apapa port. Are you saying, are there no more there, or that we need more?
We had Lily Pond. I
we
know
need
we
that.
had Lily Pond. And that was now,
Yes.
they had to turn it into a truck park owing to the issues we're having then.
Yes.
In that regard.
So we need that dedicated export terminal, because Lily Pond is now a truck transit or a truck park, if you like, marshalling for trucks to go to the port. So that's what we need. Focus on export, deliberate policies on export.
Okay.
Because we need to push the export to earn revenue. We need to have to be less dependent, import-dependent economy.
Okay.
And diversification of our revenue basis is export.
One moment, please, Mr. Bello. Let me ask Mr. Mukhtar Mohammed, the financial analyst, what is the potential of export that we might not be accessing if we don't get our act together, so to speak?
Revenue, revenue is the key. Revenue is the key when it comes to, especially to Nigeria, and especially to this government, and especially to a nation. So
and is
revenue,
it serious revenue?
We won't be getting the type of revenue that we normally get.
Okay.
And again, you not only revenue, then you look at revenue also, you need to look at manpower also. It's also a challenge, because like they are saying, they are converting some of those plays into the export plays into truck terminal. So it takes a lot for now to want to export goods. And we rightly said we are a 19%. 90% we depend on the importation of goods. And so we need to begin to see the new normal is for you to be able to even be able to export some of these goods out, because the kind of revenue that we used to have before, we might not have it again in the oil sector. So we are looking at the non-oil sector, and the biggest place in the non-oil sector is the Shippers Council and also the port. So for me, I think that's one thing we need to address. And then again, in export, you don't just think about export. You think also of storage. You think also of how long will it take for if you want to export a tuber of yam from here to America? Do we have the facility to preserve it?
Again, there's another chain.
Beyond just putting those things export, there are a lot of things that need to be done.
All right. I want to thank you very much, Mr. Mukhtar Bello, as always, for making time for us. I beg your pardon. I managed to combine two names there. There is Mr. Hassan Bello and Mr. Mukhtar Mohammed on the phone. Thank you very much, Mr. Mukhtar Mohammed, stockbroker and financial analyst.
Always a pleasure, Mr. Yori.
All right, then. Thank you very much. Okay, then. We'll open the phone lines, but we still have with us the Executive Secretary of the Nigeria Shippers Council, Mr. Hassan Bello, on Skype. And as Mukhtar noted there, there's a chain. There's another chain that is needed. Just as we were talking about a chain for imports, there's going to be another chain for export, storage, and all of that.
Hello?
Yes, sir. Can you hear us?
Yes. It's very important. What he said is instructive. Importation must be critical to the economy now. In 2019, for example, we had a revenue of 2.9 trillion naira from exportation. It is expected to go down now, the reason being the disruption in the logistic chain because of the coronavirus issue. But we need to perfect the system. We need to earn more from non-oil exports because the oil exports, the oil revenues are dwindling. We may not finance export.
Yeah, as I said, the phones are open now, because we'd like to hear from home as well. But Mr. Mukhtar Mohammed is still, Mr. Hassan Bello, I beg your pardon, Mr. Hassan Bello, Executive Secretary, is still on Skype, even as the phones are open. Yes, you're back. You were out for a while. There was an outage for a while, but I think you were saying that it is an important aspect to consider, the export now. And some of you were, I think, talking about some of the challenges that will have to be addressed. Well, in the meanwhile, Mazi Okorafor from Arochukwu has called in. Good morning, Mazi.
Good morning, Sir Yuri.
Thank you for calling in.
Honest, my main concern is all these our high sea goods that are there, all these perishable and consumables. Under this COVID-19, what do we do? And you see, all these importers now, they are being told that they do marriage. I think the federal government says, but at the end of the day, I'm sure that or the other was not carried on. Now, the question is, Nigerians are now searching of palliative. There are a lot of palliatives there that are being wasted.
Okay, you know what, Mazi Okorofa, let's put the point directly to the Executive Secretary, who we have on Skype.
Hello.
Okay. Please continue, Mazi.
Okay. Now, all these palliative and all the consumables, when you come back now, when you follow presidential task force report, they will be telling you so specimens, chemicals, listener. They are running shortage of this.
Okay.
Does it mean all those are not part and parcel of the person at the high sea?
Okay, let me try and put your point. Let me try and put your point to the Executive Secretary of the Nigeria Shippers Council. Mr. Bello, that point about the chain when it comes to perishables, for example, agriculture is probably going to be one of the more important aspects of export. What can you tell us about that and safeguarding the integrity of export produce?
Yes, there are priorities for perishable or temperature-sensitive exports. They gain priority to get access to the port. However, because of the gridlock we have in around Apapa, which is also another ball game altogether, we are doing everything to see that these perishables have priority and they go in and they're exported.
How well would you assess that it is going? Mr. Bello, how well would you assess that this prioritization is going? Because it's one thing for you to put it out there that this is indeed the intended effect. How well is it going?
You are right. You are right. How well is it going? Only yesterday we had meetings with one important terminal that is, an export terminal. And we are looking at the situation, and in 2 weeks' time, most of this cargo will go. We are monitoring. There has been agreement between the shipping companies and the terminal operators to prioritize it. Besides, Nigerian Port Authority has also given an order for the terminals to prioritize export, especially export of perishable goods. So this has been done.
Okay.
Yeah, all right. I'm talking about the issue of perishable goods and all these temperature sensitive goods, cargoes as it were. Fine, you're taking all of these measures, but again, you would also note that oftentimes most of our export cargoes get spoiled while waiting to be shipped out. This has been a recurring decimal in our port operation, and these people incur losses. To that extent, what are you doing? We've talked about the issue of the...
Can they be indemnified?
We've talked about the issue of the gridlock. The gridlock is a story on its own. It's something that, I don't know how that will be tackled.
Or is it just bad luck to the importers? Exporters.
Because we are losing money as it is.
Yes, we are losing money, and we are losing credibility, because for export, it has to be constant and frequent. You have to observe and agree with the contracts you have signed. So we are looking at that. For those that are parish, there are a lot of problems. We could have a discussion on export for a long time. But let me just say that our orientation is always for import. Even our ports are not, made to come with to be export oriented. Yeah. Let me just say, and the processes and the procedures are honestly painstaking, and we need to simplify that. There must be a deliberate attempt by the government to look at the export, streamline the processes and procedures, make sure we get export many export away as much as we can. And that's what Nigerian Shippers Council is looking at, the whole regime of export.
In that regard, can we now talk about the multimodal transport system? You know, now the roads are overburdened. We have so many trucks lined up in the seaport corridor that can't get in because of gridlock. Now, the rails, you know, we have the rail, and most of these products are coming from the hinterland. How much can we do to ensure that our rails and possibly the waterways are used as means of transporting these cargoes to the port, so that we save time, we save this issue of these goods getting bad and unnecessary loss that we're talking about?
That is a very important question. We have to find a corridor, open a corridor for export. This we could do with multi-modal approach. As you said, we have the rail. For example, we are working with Nigerian Railway Corporation to evacuate this export from Kaduna to Lagos, unhindered access. We also had a meeting with truckers only 2 days ago so that they give priority to export, and also the barges. So during the lockdown, we actually had multi-modal approach. So that's what the gridlock has taught us. The trains were operating, the barges were operating, and the road. But we cannot have one mode of transport. We cannot rely on one mode of transport. That will be suicidal.
Okay,
so
one moment, please, Mr. Bello. I beg your pardon for interrupting you, but Mr. George has called in from Lagos. Good morning, Mr. George.
Good morning, Uncle Yori. Uncle Yori, I want to ask the Executive Secretary, since the ports are exempted from the lockdown, what steps is he taking to ensure that this coronavirus spread does not come from the maritime sector? I saw videos of where the port workers were protesting or doing operations. There's nothing like social distancing there.
Okay, let me put the question. Let's put the point to the Executive Secretary. Thank you very much, Mr. George, for calling in. You heard that?
Yes, that was our first concern. We have to strike a balance between opening the port to save the economy of this country, but also observe, health protocols. It was a very difficult thing at the beginning, but now when you go to the terminals and the ports, there is a substantial compliance with social distancing, with hygiene, with sanitation. As a matter of fact, we have started mobilization and sensitization together with NCDC and the Port Health. We started yesterday. It's going to throughout the week, where we go from terminal to the port, everywhere, and the shipping companies, and preaching the idea of these protocols. NCDC have been very strategic, so that people realize that it is important we keep this port safe, because port is red district. It is vulnerable for transmission, as the caller has said. I agree with him. But the most important thing is have a non-contact port. Have an automated port where there are less and less people going to the ports, and so you don't have the danger of aggregation and assembly.
Indeed, because I think you sort of in part answered the question I would have brought up, which is how much contact really is there between foreigners who necessarily were dealing with people bringing in things, and whether the fear is more of infection from beyond our shores, or community infection, which will happen when you don't have the proper social distancing?
There are protocols for seafarers of loading cargo or loading cargo. There are very, very stringent conditions to prevent the infestation, if you like. And NIMASA, our sister agency, is looking at this, and we have at least reduced or exterminated the contact in that area.
Okay.
But we are talking about commercial operations on the port, and I think that will have to be done as Nigerian Shippers Council is doing.
One moment, please. Let me bring in Mr. Lawal, calling in from Apapa. Good morning, Mr. Lawal.
Yeah, good morning, Mr. Ayori.
Good morning.
Hello?
Please go ahead.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, this is Mr. Lawal from Apapa. Yes. Yeah, I would like to contribute to the...
Very, very briefly, please. Be very brief about it.
The area I'm going to is that all the speakers have never said anything about the problem we have of that Apapa problem. The infrastructure, we need infrastructure. The road network in Apapa is very bad. That is the major problem we have. So if the federal government should hesitate in few due cost to solve this problem, most of the what we are discussing here, everything will
okay.
be,
Thank you very much, Mr. Lawal. As I said, I wanted you to be brief, and I think you're trying your best to be so. But you know, okay, let's give Mr. Bello the last word on this. He's referred to the road network.
Yes, Mr. Lawal is right. We need the infrastructure also. This infrastructure or these roads were designed many years ago when the level of importation was not as it is now. So we need more infrastructure. And the federal government is building roads around Apapa, Mile 2. And even more important, the federal government is connecting all the ports with rail. You know, and once you do that, you see that the conundrum, the traffic situation will get better. The mistake is to rely on only one mode, which is the road. And I think the federal government but for the disruption, we will have had rail, you know, connected to the ports, and that will solve.
I think I'd like to thank you very much, Mr. Hassan Bello, Executive Secretary of the Nigeria Shippers Council, for making time to, you know, join with us this morning and clarify some of those issues.
Thank you, Mr. Bello.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Indeed. And so that brings us to the end of our program today, actually. Thank you very much to Mr. Hassan Bello, as I said, and Mr. Mukhtar Mohammed. And indeed, the callers that were able to get in to also make their own points. That's our program today. Do have a great weekend. Please be safe, as always. And, you know, see us, God willing, on Monday with a fresh edition. So on behalf of Ifunanya Eze, this is Yori Folarin saying bye-bye for now.